Okay, welcome everybody to today's panel meeting for Children's Scrutiny. If we just do introductions first. My name is Cathal Burke and I chair the Children's Scrutiny panel.
Amanda Pinnock, Councillor.
Dale O'Neill, volunteer co-optee.
Donna Bellamy, Councillor.
I'm Viv Kendrick, I'm the portfolio holder for Children's Services and I've come to observe.
Good morning, I'm Elaine McShane, Service Director for Family Support and Child Protection.
Thank you. Item 1, minutes of the previous meeting. This is to approve the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 18th of December 2017. Panel members agree those minutes? Thank you. Item 2, interests. If councillors have any interest, if they can fill in the relevant paperwork and hand it in after the meeting. Item 3, admission of the public. There are no items on this agenda to be taken in private, so everything is in public. Item 4, Ofsted letter to Director of Children's Services. This is to consider the letter received following an Ofsted visit. To update members on the panel of the letter received from Ofsted following their visit to Children's Services on the 8th and 9th of October 2018. And we have Elaine take this item. Thank you.
Good morning again. So as members can see, the letter summarises the findings of the monitoring visit as identified on the 8th and 9th of October 2017. And this was the third visit since the local authority was judged inadequate for services to children in need of help and protection. The visit was carried out by Rachel Olden and her colleague Kath McCoy. You can see that during the course of the visit, inspectors reviews progress made in help against help and protection, and the particular areas they focused on was the initial response to children in need of help and protection, assessment of risk within the initial response, management decision-making, oversight and supervision, information sharing and the multi-agency response to risk, application of thresholds, and children being seen by a social worker and seen alone. And their experiences are considered when making an assessment of risk. For the most part, the inspectors sat in what was the revised duty and advice part of Children's Social Work Services, so sat alongside team managers who were making decisions. They also undertook an audit of the identified 6 cases that they wanted to look at in more detail, and they audited those cases alongside our audit, and also met with team managers and social workers to discuss the cases and their findings and get a view from the practitioners. As you can see, the letter does highlight some areas of improvement. For example, it points to changes in the processes leading to better flow of work, more effective use of data, and an increased focus on supporting staff in order to create the right conditions for social work to develop and flourish. But what they were saying quite clear that these changes were recent and it was too early for Ofsted to see their full impact. But they're clear that there were signs of progress. However, we would say that overall the letter is not as positive as we would have hoped, and at the same time, considering the time that Leeds and Kirklees have been involved in partnership, I think we've been able to identify the range of risks that Ofsted were also seeing, and have got a clear plan of action in terms of that. I think the changes to duty and advice were very early in the stages of development, and so Ofsted couldn't see how that would be embedded in practice going forward. I wonder if there's any questions at this time.
Thank you for that. Reading this report, it's very eye-watering. It's very concerning, all the detail that's in here. They seem to be very negative about things, and very few positive things have been mentioned in here. But I just wanted to know from you, were you expecting a report like this? Does it take time for these things to embed so it didn't come as a surprise for the information that was contained in here, that coming forward?
I can confirm that actually we presented a document to Ofsted in preparation for their arrival, and we'd identified almost every area that they'd identified and set out our plans for making progress in those areas. So not fully surprising. It never makes good reading, seeing information of this type, but yet we were prepared in terms of what we'd seen and understood from the improvement team's point of view and clear actions going forward.
When's the next inspection then?
So Ofsted are due back for a monitoring visit on the 13th and 14th of March. So we're preparing for that visit. Generally every 3 months. And they have asked to look after children's service. So we're just having discussions with them in terms of is that the approach that's going to take place and preparations for that.
I know this is a difficult question, but are you expecting to see improvement in the next report? Are you expecting them to at least document there's been a change, hopefully a significant change?
I'm expecting that we see change, not as significant as we would want it to be. And I think that's something about the experience of Kirklees prior to the Leeds-Kirklees partnership in terms of leadership prior to that time, and the fact that Ofsted are looking at an inspection, a monitoring visit from an inspection that took place in September 2016. So they would be expecting to see greater change, but the Leeds-Kirklees partnership was only formalised in September, so that's a short period of time. But I am envisaging that they'll see progress.
You said that in advance of the visit you had identified many issues which you expected the inspectors to find. In which case, can you explain why and how inspectors identified a deterioration in the management of risk to vulnerable children?
I think that's Ofsted's interpretation of the management of risk. One of the things that we'd done quite soon after being involved was actually look at bringing Professor David Thorpe, into our front door arrangements to very closely look at how we were receiving contacts and information from partners, and that was seen to be an area of risk where we made some changes probably only 2 or 3 weeks before Ofsted arrived, and in the letter they're saying, although they can see that there is some small progress, actually that wasn't significant enough to say it was embedded. The other factors that we've put in place as well, because at the very first inspection, a number of things that were identified from Ofsted was around instability of social workers, the number of agency social workers that were actually in place, and part of building foundations, we had actually reduced the number of agency social workers in place, and we've increased the number of social workers employed, and that's an ongoing situation. I think the key to getting long-term change is making sure that you've got solid foundations. And that's what we're building on day by day. And that's why I feel we will see progress in March.
Thank you. In this letter, it says it mentions staff morale and frontline staff morale, but it just says too soon to evaluate its impact. Is staff morale any better? And what is, are people now coming into Kirklees rather than rather than being temporary staff, being permanent staff?
I would say if actually went out to our staff, morale has changed, morale is improving, we have got a more stable workforce. It's interesting, I was at a regional directors meeting and other directors raised concerns about their staff coming to work in Kirklees, and that's a challenge in these situations. So we are having staff coming to work from other local authorities. The other thing that's happening that I think shows some progress is that agency staff are choosing to stay in Kirklees and converting to permanent posts. So we're seeing some of that as well. So that's a growing trend. And I think as we begin to show even further progress through the monitoring visits, we will capture the social workers from the local authorities.
Can I ask another question? Just moving on from that. It says in here that social workers aren't always getting the appropriate supervision, which is concerning. If we want to retain staff, we have to make sure that that's taking place on a regular basis. Is that improving?
And not only supervision, I think the old support and development pathway for social workers was not as robust as you would want to see it, particularly given the circumstances that we're working in. So it's that formal supervision. So we've had a working party that's made up of practitioners and managers to review the supervision policy and set out what that policy needs to look like. And actually, by encouraging everybody to be involved in that, it's about gaining ownership. So that is improving. We have reviewed and established a revised career development pathway in terms of other opportunities of support that are available for social workers. And part of that is about the offer to social workers and about wanting social workers to remain. It's that part of our retention strategy. So supervision, access to appropriate training and development opportunities with broader wraparound, strong, clear leadership from senior managers.
I appreciate this might be difficult, but is it at all possible that in future appearances before this panel, instead of I think, we think, could we have some evidence to back up what is being said?
So we provide regular reports to the Improvement Board that's chaired by Eleanor Brazil, who's the Commissioner for Kirklees, and everything that I'm setting out here, I have to provide evidence to the Improvement Board. So there are reports that set this out, and what we're really focusing on is, so this is what we've done, what difference has it made and what impact is it having, most importantly for children and young people and their families that are central to everything that we're doing. So we do have reports available that sets this evidence out that are accessible.
Question to the Chair then. Do we have access to that information?
Yeah, the Improvement Board I used to attend until some of the dates were changed. Councillor Bellamy was at the last Improvement Board meeting and will provide an update later on. Yeah. Any further questions or comments from panel members? Can I just ask then about, you said there was some work done before the visit from Ofsted where you identified some of the areas of concern. Is there work being taking place now to identify any issues, and have any issues come to light where you know that may become a problem when Ofsted visit 13th, 14th of March?
So we have an improvement plan, 10-point plan. If Ofsted come to visit in March and they looked after children, we have got two sections of part of the 10-point plan. One is around looked after children, one is around care leavers. And also we'll look at permanence, and they're the areas that they will look at. And we have action plans and actions and priority actions set against each one of those areas. And that is based on the initial inspection in September 2016 to make sure that actually we're addressing the points raised by Ofsted, but actually we're going beyond that as well. We're looking at inspections of other areas and seeing where areas of concerns are raised, and then assessing ourselves against that. So we're doing the best we can to prepare ourselves for the next visit.
Thank you. The partnership arrangement that you have with Leeds, that we have with Leeds, how's that getting on at the moment? What stage are we at with that?
I think that seems to be making good progress. People may be aware or not aware that I actually came across first seconded as an improvement partner from Leeds from the 1st of January, I've now been made Permanent Service Director, so I am now part of Kirklees, but still working very closely with the Deputy Director, Sal Tariq, and Steve Walker as the Director of Children's Services. We have 2 improvement partners that were service managers in Leeds, sat in Kirklees, and what we're doing is we're looking at matters where we need additional expertise. We can call on Leeds as well to look to see if they've got that expertise. But because actually this was a unique situation, this was the first time this approach had been taken. If you look in the media, this is taking place elsewhere. So what we're also doing is where we've got areas that we feel we need to develop, we're looking at where best practices through Ofsted inspections and contacting other local authorities as well. So we're getting the breadth of expertise available, and I think the improvement board is seeing that the relationship, the partnership is showing to be positive, but recognition that there is still a lot of work to do.
Can I just take us back a little bit to, you mentioned about since the partnership was formed and that a lot of positive work has taken place since then. You mentioned leadership before that, issues around leadership. Could you expand a little bit more on that for the benefit of the panel?
I can. I think in terms of children's social work services, they had a number of different managers at senior level, and I think what Eleanor Brazil identified in her report when proposing the Leeds partnership, that there is not strong leadership within the numbers of individuals actually being in place, and in some senses they might have taken Kirklees in a retrograde step. So in terms of leadership coming in, myself first and foremost, it's that stability again at senior leadership level and that coherence in terms of areas of work. I support, I challenge in terms of the areas of development that we need to take place. We have social work teams that have actually not been guided appropriately. Previously, I would say we have had high caseloads, and we're really scrutinising that and giving strong, clear messages about our support will be offered, but clear expectations in terms of quality of practice and moving forward.
Can I just ask a further question on social workers? We mentioned agency, those who are employed. Can I also ask about those leaving? Are there any numbers that you can refer to of social workers leaving in the last number of months, and how in terms of agency, have gone up or down?
I can say very clearly that we've recruited 40 new social workers into Kirklees. And so hence the number of agency social workers have actually reduced at that number. What we are doing in more detail, and we're almost at the final point, and this can be made available because it will go to the improvement board, is actually the retention, because we really want to focus on retention. So are we retaining numbers of people that we're drawing in, because that's important in terms of continuing stability and getting knowledge and experience expanded. What we think we're seeing, and we've just got to get the final detail, is that those leavers have left are still historic to the previous management group, and actually there's been a slowdown of leavers actually beyond the Kirklees Leeds partnership, but we're just doing the finer detail of that, and that's something that we report onto the improvement board.
Going back to the letter itself, one of the paragraphs which stuck out was the immediate risk to children is not always recognised and responded to in a timely way. Can you explain how this is now being dealt with?
There were 2 points on that. The first was around the front door, which is now duty and advice, and the decision-making of the team managers and the social workers. What we have on a daily basis is an improvement partner that's experienced on working in the front door from Leeds, that actually sits alongside the team managers and works very closely with them in terms of exploring their decision making. And also we've had David Thorpe and his team revisit the team and work on establishing a clear understanding what is significant harm to inform the decision making around the social workers. The second stage was the decision making in our assessment and intervention teams, which was very much about a timely decision and actually ensuring that children are seen and seen alone, and that their voice is taken into account. And again, we have an improvement partner that's working alongside the service managers in EDA's service to ensure that those decisions are made and monitored. We have a weekly review meeting, so every Monday afternoon we have team manager representatives and service managers led by Charlotte Jackson, who review the decision makings over the last week and actually can ask for decisions to be changed where they're not felt to be appropriate. Alongside that, the two improvement partners are meeting on a 2-weekly basis with the team managers for the assessment and intervention and duty and advice to actually develop consistency in their decision making. And then on a monthly basis, I have a practice and progress operational meeting where I bring the team managers and service managers from across the whole of children's services, and we use outcome-based accountability to look at the decisions that we're making. So how many have we made, how well are we doing, and what is the difference making to children and young people, and if we're not doing things right, what do we need to do differently?
So Ofsted will be satisfied with the work that's now taking place and there will not be any children at risk?
I'm confident that they'll be satisfied.
Can I just ask one other one regarding the letters, the impact of the child's voice and what we've done to improve that?
So one of the things that we were not really very good at is, so we have a range of information that comes in around children and their voice, so using complaints, we have a participation worker, we have a youth council, we have a care leavers council, but actually we're not effectively using that information and bringing it together and taking the themes from what they're saying and put it into practice where we can. Also, we've got case audits where we're looking very clearly, are we taking the voice of the child into account appropriately? What are the themes that are coming out in that? And actually setting ourselves tasks going forward to make sure that not only are we listening to the voice of children and young people and families as well, but actually where we're seeing areas for development that we're putting that into practice, but also that we're feeding back to young people where we can't make changes that they might be asking for.
You said that the voice of the child was being taken into account. Should it not be that the voice of the child has primacy?
I think, yeah, the voice of the children shall be central to everything that we're doing, take their views into account. You can't always depend on what they're saying, you can't always give them the response that they want, but actually what is really, really important, that they feel that their views have been heard and that we can have a really positive conversation with them. We use a variety of tools in terms of even trying to get the voice of younger children that might not be fully verbal. So using pictorial approach to actually getting not only it's their voice in a different way so that they can contribute to decision making, so you understand how they're feeling, whether that's smiley faces, talking about what they might want to live with as an ounces approach that you can use. So there's a variety of models that we use, and wherever possible, you will take their voice and follow through what they want. That's not always possible depending on what they're asking for.
I'm very happy to hear what you said, and the fact that many of the recommendations in the Monroe report regarding capturing the voice of the child now seem to be employed. So thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments from panel members before we close this item? No? As I say, obviously, we look at the negatives in there. There are some positives in there, and there is different paragraphs and different sections which relate to the improvement that is taking place, and it is a journey, and it's important to recognise that we've come a long way from where we were, and that has been recognised about engagement and improvement that's taking place in the improvement plan and staff engagement. So there is positives in there, and I'm sure with all of the good work that's taking place, and that will be further recognised when Ofsted visit again. Is there anything the Cabinet Member would like to say? No? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, item 5. Item 5 is the proposals for changes to support and transport for disabled children. This, for members of the committee, will consider Cabinet report relating to changes to support for disabled children. And we have Sue Richards, who is going to lead us through this item.
Do you want to cover the whole report or just the part about transport? Just the part about transport. Okay. So this originally, we set out to do consultation on transport, home to school transport for all children. As part of the, when we concluded the consultation, it was determined that a better way of progressing the reports was to separate out home to school transport for children with special educational needs and disabilities, and separate from that would be home to school transport for children in mainstream provision or non-SEN provision, and the latter formed part of a separate report, which I think you're going to defer today. So this is about home to school transport. The report actually includes something around the Access Fund, which I'm not going to cover, and transport for disabled adults and children, social care transport. So the part about home to school transport for disabled children, we carried out quite comprehensive consultation, and you'll find details of that. Taking into account the consultation, the people really valued home to school transport who have special educational needs and disabilities. That was absolutely clear. I think we also determined that people would like flexibility about that. So at the moment it's buses or taxis or transport training for a few people. So our proposals take into account the wide range of consultation. The consultation events included drop-in, it included direct mailing for people who currently use transport, and it included work with the schools to get messages out. So the proposals for home to school transport, I can go into more detail about the consultation if you want me to, but I'll progress to the proposals. So at the moment, the council has a legal duty to provide transport or to provide support for people to travel to school, and the distinction is quite important. The council doesn't have a duty to provide transport to school; they have a duty to provide support for people to get to school, and that's quite important. The council is, as you will be aware, is really keen. One of its main drives is to maximise the independence of people, but particularly disabled people. And we're really keen that whatever we do about supporting families to get their children to school really carries that badge of maximising the independence of those children. And that's an absolutely critical element of this. So we had a number of proposals. So you will see proposal 1 is to retain the status quo, which wouldn't have any disruption for existing people. But we really felt that that doesn't take into account what people can do for themselves or maximise people's independence. We think it's also quite inconsistent with some people using direct payments. Sorry, let me just... You'll be aware I've stepped in at the last minute to this. I have been involved in writing this report, but haven't been prepared this morning, so just bear with me for a moment. Okay. Let me start again. I'm on the wrong page. I'm on the adults bit there. So let me start again from the proposals. So the proposal 1 is for us to provide... I am sorry. Just bear with me for a moment. I will get there in the end, and I do want to get there, know what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to find the correct place in the report. It's a while since I did this. 29, thank you very much. I think I was in the right place originally. It is, and I was in the right place to start with. I beg your pardon. So retain the status quo as the first proposal. The second proposal is to ensure, with immediate effect, that we promote all reasonable means, that we explore all reasonable means of somebody getting to school before we look at the provision of somebody's a bus or a taxi. That encourages independent travel. We'd achieved some savings, and it's got a consistent approach for all eligible people. But really, we feel that we've got a limited capacity to undertake. I am sorry, we're not on the right page there, but that's on the social care transport. I'm just going to do it from memory, so I'm not going to take you through all the proposals. The proposal that's recommended, I think Scrutiny will significantly approve of. We really want to ensure that in promoting independence for families, that we are a lot more flexible about how we support children to get to school. So the intention is that we will expand on the current travel training team, and they will be a travel team. Not just doing travel training, but looking at all the available options to support families to get their child to school, so that every child who is referred for transport support will be referred to that team. For some children, that may just mean that they are seen by the team. If you have profound and complex needs, it's very clear that you won't be able to travel independently to school. But for some families, it might be important that actually, rather than give people a taxi to school, that parents transport that child and we provide alternative support for their other children. So the family will look at working, the team will look at working with the whole family to determine what the best way for the family is of getting children to school. That may include transport training. So we do that now, but we're quite limited in the team, so the team will be expanded. It may include a review when the child gets older, so that actually we provide transport when the child is too young to use a bus on their own, but when the child gets to 10, 11, 12, that we provide transport training for that child. We may look at whether we meet in the bus station a group of children and provide support on a bus into the school. So it'll be a variety of options, but much less about what do we have. You can have option A, B or C to doing something that's more holistic around families. So it will be an investment for the council. The intention is that the main intention is that families are supported with independent travel, and that goes on into adulthood. So another part of this report is about social care transport for adults. Quite often when people get to adulthood and they've always had a taxi or a special bus to school, You're past the point of being able to support people to travel independently. That limits all sorts of things. That limits your social life, it limits your ability to work, and we think starting early intervention and prevention here is critical, that starting early with families to look at how best we can support children to get to school is really important. So an investment early on will maximise people's independence, and the intention is that creating less dependence will mean that the council actually is more efficient in the way that it spends its money, providing better outcomes for children and families. I can answer questions, and I do apologise for being a bit kind of all over the place with this. It was yes.
I was very impressed by the number of parents who seemed to respond to all the surveys that you put out on this subject, and some of them seem very receptive. But I was wondering to what degree are some parents resistant to what you call the holistic approach, and also the ultimate aim of enabling children to be independent? Because I can quite appreciate how some parents might think what matters is today, whereas the council is looking in the long term. How are you going to be able to combat that particular understanding by the parents?
I think as parents we mostly want our children to be safe, and sometimes children push the boundaries of that. I want a mobile phone, I'd like to go to the park on my own the first time. So children are always striving for independence, but as a parent you really want your children to be safe, and that's a fear of a lot of parents of disabled children, that they will come to not just physical harm, but that they will be treated badly on buses. And so we're really mindful of the fears of parents, and when we talk about independence, it's as independent as possible, and for some children that will never be full independence. So we are really trying to work with families to recognise the fears that families will have. We have a duty to ensure that things are as safe as we can possibly make them for children, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that people take proportionate and reasonable risks that we all take. And that's about positive risk management. So we will be working with families to determine what the fears are, and we don't want to push families who are already experiencing difficult circumstances into more stress. We're really keen that we work alongside people. Some of that will be challenging, and sometimes we will be challenging the expectation of families, but we really want to use what we call a strength-based approach. And children with disabilities have strengths as well, and the families of those children have strengths, and we want to work with those. I think we need to build up a level of trust with families, that they're trusting that this isn't a cost-saving exercise. This is about us really trying to look at the now and how children get to school now, and how we prepare children to be resilient adults as well. It's not an easy journey for some families. I absolutely accept that, but it doesn't mean that it's not a journey that we shouldn't take alongside them.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that. What would happen in a situation where there's a conflict between the council's decision or the support plan or whatever it might be that's put in place and what the parents believe is suitable transport for the child? Is there an opportunity for review? What would that process be?
What the report does is says that we're going to set this up. We need to work out the detail of that afterwards, because you're right, there will be times when the council thinks that a child could be more independent than the family could. There might equally be something the other way round, but if we deal with that. The council will work as far as possible with the family to look at how can we take very small steps so that we reassure people that we're not putting children at risk. But when there comes a time when the council thinks that somebody could be independent and the family require a taxi or a bus, we will look at how that would be funded by the family. We don't necessarily say that the family couldn't use the council's provision of transport, but we would expect that the family would fund that. But that would be a long way down the route, and we really don't want to get to that point. It would be a long way down our discussions with that family. But we have to be clear that, that this is about a proper assessment and a proper risk assessment of that family and that child. It may be that we decide that we'll do something in small steps over the 12-month period, so it may take us quite a long time. But in the end, we would be, if the family decide that they would like their child to have less independent travel, then we would expect that the family would fund that. We don't know, we haven't yet determined what some sort of appeal process would be, but we will be looking at what the process would be for that to happen.
The reason why I raise that is there may be issues later on, because you're talking about reviewing your own processes down the line, and parents, carers may be used to what's in place, may not want that to change. So I'm just thinking about a scenario where you review the situation, you propose a change, they're quite happy to maintain the status quo. How would you deal with that situation? Is there likely to be a review process? That was the thought process behind the question.
The review process is really about children change as they get older. And just because you have transport at 4 doesn't mean that at 14 that's still appropriate. Children grow up whether they're disabled or not, and their capacity to do things does change. So for some people, it will be a light touch review. So there are children who have profound and complex needs, and we will keep that under review. Part of that might be keeping it under review because the provision that we've made no longer suits the family as the family circumstances have changed. So it might be that families welcome review. We will be reviewing, though, if the family circumstances change and as the child grows up. That will be part of an ongoing review of the child. So if a child has a provision of transport at 4 or 5 years old, by the time they get to 11, we will be looking again with the family at how that child is managing now, because it won't be the same, and you wouldn't expect a 4-year-old to get to school, but you might expect an 11 or 12-year-old child to get to school. We have to look at very much individual circumstances. So for some children who need to be schooled quite a long way away from home, it might be that they could manage 1 bus, but they can't manage 2 buses. So depending on where the child goes to school, that may well influence how we support the family to get that child to school. So it's very much around individual circumstances, and that's why we want to have a team that work alongside people, so that we're not just having a kind of 1 or 2 sizes fits all, so that actually we have that capacity to be much more flexible about the way in which we do things.
Sorry, just one more. I just think it's important, obviously, to highlight this isn't about saving money. It's actually about promoting independence. It's about family being involved in the process and the review process. So I think it's important to get that message out there.
Absolutely agree with you. And I think one of the problems that we had with the consultation is some families were saying this doesn't affect me because my child is disabled. And we want to get the message out there that just because somebody is disabled doesn't mean that we want to almost just give them the one size fits all. We really want to make sure that actually we're looking at the life course of children. So we've talked a bit about all age disability, the life course of a child, and thinking about planning for the future, the now, as you say, and the future, to make sure that we really are supporting families in the way in which they want to be supported, but also spending the council's money in the best way. We do want to provide the right sort of support for children, which costs money, and that does mean that we need to ensure that we are targeting expensive transport support in the right places.
Thank you. I think, you know, sort of going for independence is an absolutely fantastic idea, and, you know, a lot of disabled sort of people want their own independence. Do I have a bit of an issue, though, with, you know, we can get these children possibly into even mainstream school because, you know, due to their disabilities doesn't actually affect their learning or anything like that. However, most school buses, or even standard buses, there's a lot of them are not designed to accept wheelchairs and that sort of thing. Are you talking to the bus companies and the people that run the school buses, and even the people that run sort of college buses? Because I have heard that the university and New College also struggle with transport for disabled.
The short answer is yes, we will be. So we've already started those discussions, because you're right, this does entail the Passenger Transport Authority, you know, changing the buses that people travel on. We're also talking about in the team there will be, because a lot of the reasons why people have special transport is around behaviour, and so we're talking about behaviour support assistance rather than just escorts. We're talking about behaviour support assistance being on buses or providing the support to families about how somebody behaves on a bus. So there's a variety of things that will need to be in place in order to make this aspiration a reality.
Can I just take you back to when you started, you said about the legal duty the Council has to provide support for transport. Could you just expand a little bit further on that? And then if you could explain about what happens now and how things have been. Has there been a one-size-fits-all approach, and how long has that been for before we started to look at alternative arrangements for more independence?
So I'm probably doing a slight disservice talking about a one-size-fits-all, because we have been doing travel training for children. I think what we have had is a limited number of options. So we've had a bus or a taxi or travel training, or the parents' transport. So that's a very limited number of options. So it's perhaps doing a disservice to the people who've been doing it, because they have tried, where possible, to do the right thing within the way in which we have allocated resources. So the council has resourced transport training, but hasn't necessarily resourced those wider options as part of its policy. I'm sorry, Councillor Burt, what was the other part of your question?
About the legal duty and where we stand with that for providing support.
I'm just going to find it in the report, which you'll have a sense of dread about, bearing in mind my lack of ability to find things. Just bear with me for 2 minutes. The transport bit isn't, unfortunately, my area of expertise, and you would have had the expert witness here had people not been poorly. So the relevant legislation places a statutory duty on local authorities to ensure that suitable travel arrangements are made to facilitate an eligible child's attendance at school. Under Section 508B of the Act, the kind of relevant parts, if you look on page 4 or page 60, it's actually in the other home to school transport report. The local authorities are required to provide free transport for all children of compulsory age of their nearest suitable school available that provides education appropriate to the age, ability and aptitude of any child with special educational needs. So it's determining which child is eligible for free school transport. So an option for the council is just to change the eligibility for free school transport. That's not what we're talking about here, although it may be that less children are eligible for transport, but many more children will be eligible for ensuring that transport arrangements are made. So there's a distinction between providing transport and providing transport arrangements. And the transport arrangements we're proposing to make are about supporting people with a wider variety of transport support.
I'd like to go on to this issue of what, you mentioned it yourself just now, the nearest suitable school. What does suitable mean?
So that would be outside of the remit of this. The travel arrangements won't change anything. There would be a determination of the nearest suitable school for a child with special educational needs or disabilities. Until that decision is made, then the travel team wouldn't be involved at all. Once the decision has been made about educationally what's the right school for a child, then the transport team would step in to determine how best to support the child to get to school.
You mentioned transport training. Could you just expand a little bit on that and what that package would look like?
So some of it involves hiding behind hedges when the person's nearly ready to be travelling independently. I'm being humorous about that because I used to do it in a former life when I was a care assistant. So it starts off breaking down the journey into small steps so that actually there's the walking to the bus stop, there's the getting on the bus, there's the getting off the bus. We have lots of assistive technology now that can help people to alert when to get off the bus, so there's plenty of support. It involves walking the walk with the child to start with, and then stepping back and following them for a while. It involves then perhaps letting them do the walk to the bus stop and meeting them at the bus stop. It depends on the child really, and how quickly they're able to learn. Assistive technology is really, really important here, and certainly in adult social care, which is the main part of my role, we have GPS systems, so that in the unlikely event of somebody becoming lost from their route, then actually a GPS system can alert a central point or the family. So assistive technology can be used and is used a lot within adult services. We would be risk assessing at all points to make sure that the child was as safe as necessary in crossing roads, that they took a route that was the safest route, and then putting all that together. And then, as I say, following the child for a while to make sure that they've got that really in their kind of internalised. So very dependent on the individual child, how quick they are to learn, but it involves, for most children, it does involve the a one-to-one support for until they're able to do it on their own.
Any further questions or comments from panel members? You mentioned at the beginning that it wasn't for a savings that this has been undertaken. Will there be a saving made as a result of implementing these changes?
Yet to be determined, really. There's nothing that's set for us in this part of the home to school transport. I think it more likely that there's an initial cost because actually working one-to-one with a child is a lot more expensive than the provision of a bus. It really is more about it's definitely more about the independence of that child and that adult, and hopefully there will be a saving later on down the line when the child and then the adult is independent, and it may be years down the line when the child then becomes a young adult and is able, as you say, to get to college independently. Much more likely they'll be with their peers on the bus. Much more likely that they will then be able to take up some sort of employment. And it's life-changing for children and young adults. And having worked 35 years with people with learning disabilities, a really important component of your life is the ability to travel as independently as possible. And that's different for different children, and it doesn't mean casting people out to do something that they're not able to do. It promotes self-esteem for people, so actually it impacts on all sorts of areas of their life that isn't about necessarily about transport. How people view themselves is really important.
Yeah, I was thinking the same about the initial investment and about investing in young people to become more independent, to be a greater part of what's happening in their communities and being able to be part of what happens with their peers and everyone else. So I think it's a package which will support independence, which can only be a good thing for young people. Any questions from panel members before we finish? And I think the Cabinet Member would like to add.
I have to say I welcome this move forward. I've come across too many people as older young people, as young adults, whose lives are actually curtailed, cornered, if you like, that suitable arrangements and about independence with travel haven't been made in time for them, and they are limited in what they can do in life. They're limited to a particular day centre that provides transport, and they're limited in being able to explore a social life in a wider context. And I can only welcome this. And when you think about with things like Safer Places, which has been developed by MENCAP across Kirklees, working with the bus companies, working with public officers, with businesses, which actually help support this, where people are anxious or feel under threat or worried, it's a place to go to get help and support. So there are lots of mechanisms coming together, and I think this is the right and proper step forward.
Yeah, I think equipping young people with the skills at the earliest possible age benefits them than those who have not had those interventions and would find it more difficult. So there will be a phased approach to any changes that occur. So.
Yes, there will be a phased approach, and I think children who are already on buses and taxis, we don't have the capacity in the system, even if we wanted to kind of whip all those children off buses straight away. We'll be working with families. We will be working with existing people who use existing taxis and buses, but our focus is on new children as well, so that actually we don't set up expectations that are wrong for children and families. But we will be reviewing the provision of transport for all children.
Okay. If there's nothing further,
I've got a question about additional proposal 1. It says that analysis of data from 2017 shows how often passes are used or not used.
Which report are you looking at? Because that sounds like it's a mainstream report, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, are we not covering that now?
we're covering item 5. Is this referring to item 5?
Page 8. Are we not? We've not got onto this yet, have we?
We're not covering item 6 today.
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to thank Sue for stepping in and being able to cover this item for us, and for the Cabinet Member as well for the contribution. So item 6, the next item is item 6. Unfortunately, the officer that was going to cover this item for us was unable to attend, so I'd ask the committee that we defer this item for the next meeting, or before, if we see fit to do so, to cover it. Any comments from panel members? We're happy to defer. Yeah. So item 6. So item 7 is the work programme. You should all have a copy of the work programme. Any comments or questions from panel members on the work programme? We don't have anything highlighted as such for the next meeting, which is in March. But we will shortly be putting the agenda forward, but we will try and put item 6, proposals for changes to home school transport policy for children attending mainstream school. Councillor Bellamy, do you want to mention the improvement board? It was mentioned during the meeting about the improvement board and the information that goes to the improvement board. Yolandi did send an email out about any members who wish to attend. We're allowed to have one place to attend those meetings. So once the dates are circulated again, if anybody would like to attend, then we can do that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did. I was going to attend the last Improvement Board meeting. I actually went and it had been cancelled. So I did actually turn up for the meeting, but was the only person there. Since then, I have met with Eleanor Brazil last week to discuss sort of the next Improvement Board. She's very keen that somebody attends. She's very keen that we challenge as well. She's explained that she keeps the meetings very, very focused and they're usually around sort of one subject per meeting. She definitely encourages everybody to speak. She likes to know what's happening. Just before I met with Eleanor Brazil, I actually sort of turned up a little bit early and she was meeting with front door staff, front of house staff sort of thing, from social services, and she was discussing the new sort of early intervention, and they named it earlier, how that's working. That does seem, and from talking to the member of staff that's dealing with it, that does seem now to be on the correct path, and we just, they also said at the Improvement Board they're very, very focused on the improvement and the evidence, and they will supply, all the evidence base there. So the meeting's next week, so I can quite happily feedback at the next panel meeting. We did discuss some things that have gone wrong in the background, but I'm not going to mention no names in public, so I'm quite happy to say that, but in private.
Thank you. Would it be useful if we have the minutes circulated to panel members of the Improvement Board? Yeah? Can we minute that? Okay, so then we can refer to the minutes of the Improvement Board, and we have officers come to speak on the different issues. If they're referring to something that took place in the Improvement Board, then we've got the relevant information. Okay, if there's nothing else on the work programme, move to 8, which is future meeting. So this is to note that the next meeting of the panel will be on Monday, the 5th of March 2018 at 10 o'clock. Okay, thank you very much for your attendance. The next part of the programme is the informal agenda, which we will do shortly. Thank you.